When you're submitting an app on the Apple App Store, you as a developer need to make sure that you're following Apple's guidelines. Some of the guidelines state the standard of how the app is supposed to be, and others are basic fine prints that state that Apple takes a 30% cut of any payment that happens throughout your app. We all know the lawsuit between Apple and Fortnite's Epic Games, where Epic Games wasn't too happy that Apple was taking a 30% cut on all the V-Bucks being purchased through Fortnite's iOS app. A lawsuit which Apple won for the most part. Okay, let's focus on today, and this story is from the startup 37 Signals. 37 Signals, they've built Basecamp, they've built the Hey email app, and now they've built a new calendar app, which is a companion to the email app. And they built the platform and they submitted the iOS app to Apple. However, after 19 days of a review process, Apple rejected the calendar app's submission. But it's not the first time that 37 Signal is having a rejection from Apple. The email app Hey also got rejected in 2020 because they didn't want users to sign up through Apple and having to pay the 30% cut through Apple's sign up process. So after a short battle with Apple, they managed to get their email app approved in 2020. And now they're seeking to repeat the same process over again to get their calendar app approved. But the way that they operate with this whole thing kind of irks me a little. Let's talk about it. Alright, let's begin with 37 Signals. They've been around for a while, they're kind of experienced in the whole tech landscape. So they've created Hey, which is an email platform that they charge $99 per year for. And it's a pretty neat service. People really like the user experience of the Hey email service. They have a bunch of cool features like screening first-time senders, having a better experience for newsletter reading, setting aside emails, and a little bit before June of 2020, they had their email platform available as an iOS app. And in June of 2020, they were trying to push for a software update to push new features and fix bugs, and Apple rejected it. And from this email response from Apple that one of the founders posted, they're basically in violation of two guidelines, Guideline 3.1.1 and Guideline 3.1.3b. 3.1.1 basically states that if there's a feature that needs to be unlocked through payment within the app, that feature needs to be unlockable through in-app purchases. They also mention in the email what exactly Hey is violating by citing Hey's pricing on their website. So basically Apple is telling them that even though you're charging customers outside of the App Store, when the customers download the same service through the App Store, they cannot pay for it. So that's in violation. However, for Rule 3.1.1, there is an exception if your app qualifies as a reader app. And reader apps fall under the section 3.1.3a. So reader apps are basically apps that allow users to access previously purchased content or subscriptions, and Apple stated a specific list of eligible categories that qualify as readers. Specifically, magazines, newspapers,
books, audio, music, videos, access to professional databases, voice over IP, cloud storage, and approved services such as classroom management apps.
Since Hey is an email app, it didn't fall under the category of reader apps as classified by Apple. So now going back to the email, they're in violation of another guideline, 3.1.3b, which basically states that apps that operate across multiple platforms must allow users to access content through iOS app. That means that the subscription service that we're offering on the web should also be available through the app, including potentially the sign-up process, which involves payment. So the team at Hey gets really pissed at this response, and they don't want Apple to be taking a 30% cut of the $100 that they're charging for customers. One of the founders, David Heinemeier Hansson, you might know him, he's the creator of Ruby on Rails, the framework. He goes on a massive Twitter rant about the whole situation. Wow, I'm literally stunned. Apple just doubled down on their rejection of Hey's ability to provide bug fixes and new features unless we submit to their outrageous demand of 15 to 30% of our revenue. Even worse, we are told that unless we comply, they'll remove the app. He calls Apple mafioso. He's also calling on his congressperson. He's also name-calling Tim Cook. And David makes enough noise on Twitter and gets enough traction that TechCrunch ends up writing an article the next day about the whole issue. And the day after that, TechCrunch ends up talking to Phil Schiller, who is an executive at Apple. You might know him from this clip.
Can't innovate anymore, my ass.
Anyway, Phil Schiller ends up telling TechCrunch that email is not and has never been an exception included in this rule, and he also offers Hey a solution to bypass this whole issue by stating that one way that Hey could have gone is to offer a free or paid version of the app with basic email reading features on the App Store, then separately offered an upgraded email service that worked with the Hey app on iOS on its own website. So David from Hey goes back to Twitter and responds to Phil Schiller, and he says that they will implement a fix based on his comments. And that fix is basically what allowed them to stay on the App Store to this day. That fix is basically a random email that anyone that downloads the Hey app is able to generate if they download it. It's just a gimmick email, and if you create it, it's an email that's available to you for 14 days, and after that, that email gets deleted. And it's an email with like a bunch of gibberish at hey.com. So it's like a special feature for iOS users, but it's most definitely a hack for them to have been able to stay on the App Store. And we also got this response from Apple, actually. Apple read their thread, and Apple said, "We've seen David's tweet and look forward to working with you on a path forward. This update has been approved." So this whole David and Goliath story ends up coming to an end, and now we're happy and we'll live forever, ever after again. What's the expression? And they lived happily ever after. Right. So from this whole scenario, Apple actually also had to change their guidelines and to be able to accommodate this new change and these new concessions that they made. When I checked on the Wayback Machine from this whole incident, around September of 2020, a few months after this whole Hey and Apple fight, Apple ends up changing their guideline and they implement a 3.1.3F guideline, which is for free standalone apps. And it states that free apps acting as a standalone companion to a paid web-based tool, example voice over IP, cloud storage, email services, and web hosting, do not need to use in-app purchase provided there's no purchasing inside the app or calls to action for purchase outside of the app. Alright, so through all the noise that was made on Twitter, all the public discussions that were had, Hey was able to get what they wanted. They also made a minor concession by adding a hack onto their sign-up process on the app, which allowed them to stay on the App Store, but now they don't have to give Apple their 30% and they're happy. They did use their means that they had within their reach, which was their voice, and that's great. It's true that even though they were not initially abiding by the guidelines, rather than questioning how they could, they questioned the guidelines itself to see whether they fit into it or not. And at the end of the day, Apple did have to carve a new space for them in the guideline sheet. So kudos to them for that. Now let's fast forward to the present, 2024. And Hey now has a new feature into the app, which is the calendar feed. Again, just like Hey, the email platform, the calendar portion is the same reimagination of something that already exists, which is our calendar apps that we already use. And since the calendar portion is part of Hey, the email service, and if we look at Apple's guideline for 3.1.3F, which basically talks about companion apps, from an initial look, the calendar app definitely qualifies for 3.1.3F. But the calendar app got rejected and now everyone's angry again. But when one of the founders, Jason Fried, asked the Apple representative why they got rejected and was asking what they could do, he asked the question if all these features were put into the existing Hey app, would it get approved? To which the Apple representative basically said, yeah. If we just put all these features in the existing app, is that okay? Answer, yes. So Apple thinks separate apps for iCloud is better for users, but doesn't want competing services like Hey to be able to do the same. What? Why? And when I first read it, even though David, the founder, is very dramatic with his tweets, I did empathize with it, and I did see the whole Apple bad, startup good situation. Apple is making the guidelines, and when the guidelines are not clear, they can basically dictate what happens in the gray zone. If we were to go back to 3.1.3F and we were to discuss what it exactly means to be a standalone companion to a web service, we could easily assume that Hey is in the right by building a calendar app that is a companion to the original email app. But another way to interpret it is that a companion app needs to basically replicate the original initial service that is being offered as the web service. For example, the Hey app that provides email is basically a replica of what is being offered as the web service. The Hey app is literally a way for consumers to consume the web service through the app on their phone. But the calendar, which is just part of a feature of the main app, doesn't really qualify as a standalone companion to the main app under 3.1.3f, maybe, according to Apple's gray zone. That's totally a fair discussion. And I do wonder how the startup's going to be dealing with this. I don't know if they're going to repeat the same shouting on Twitter that they did last year.
Apple just called to let us know that they're rejecting the Hey Calendar app from the App Store in current form. Same bullying tactics as last time. Push delicate rejections to a call with a first name only person who'll softly inform you it's your wallet or your kneecaps. Since it's clear we're never gonna pay them the extortion 30% ransom, they're going through the bullshit about the app doesn't do anything when you download it. But the whole the app doesn't do anything isn't even in the formal guidelines. It's completely made up to the purpose of bullying shakedown. Look at all these apps that don't do anything when you download them.
So basically there's just this dramatic meltdown happening on Twitter from David again. He did get a lot of traction again for his recent complaint on January 5th. And I still want to run through it because he did get the criticism from the representative at Apple that his app, Hey Calendar, doesn't do anything when you download it. And then he ends up stating 4 other apps, the Salesforce app, JP Morgan, Netflix, and Google Calendar. And he's like, but the app doesn't do anything isn't even in the formal guidelines. It's completely made up for the purpose of this bullying shakedown. Look at all these apps that doesn't do anything when you download them. And he can just say whatever he wants using his platform right now. But when I looked into it, Salesforce falls under an enterprise app, and enterprise services are covered under 3.1.3c. And he also brings in JP Morgan, and JP Morgan is covered under 3.2.1 under apps used for financial trading, investing, or money management should be submitted by the financial institution performing such services. And then he brings up Netflix, and Netflix is covered under 3.1.3a as a reader app, specifically video and content subscription. And he also brings up Google Calendar, which is basically would have been the best example. However, even though in this screenshot it shows you sign in, when you actually go on Google Calendar and you click on sign in, it redirects you to Google, and Google allows you to either create a new Google account or sign in with your existing user. He's definitely using his platform to get what he wants, and definitely as a startup, you kind of need to do whatever you need to do to be able to survive and to be able to get to where you need to be. However, this behavior just irked me a little bit for some reason, but that's just me. I don't really know if the Twitter shouting portion is gonna help again this time around, because the last time when they were shouting, it was right before WWDC, and Apple kind of needed a clean image before getting into their whole we love developers vibe with WWDC. So maybe down the line, the team at Hey might find a loophole to be able to exploit and get the calendar app on the App Store. Okay, this is me from the following day, and there has been a response from David because they worked over the weekend to resubmit an update for the Hey Calendar app. And basically, the update now allows users to be able to access something at the bottom, which is browse events in Apple's history. Basically, from the criticism that they got from the prior day, they addressed it by making the app less useless, by basically hacking their way and implementing a feature that will allow users to be able to see Apple's history by clicking on this portion. And great, this is the type of response that should have been expected from a developer. You encounter an issue and you're trying to find a loophole to get your app through. So you basically build a little thing, and now it's gonna go through the review process and maybe potentially get approved now that it has a purpose for the tester. We also got more clarity on the rejection. This is the transcript email from the review process after they got their phone call. And they say, during our evaluation, we determined that your app is not in compliance. Specifically, users are required to have a Hey For You subscription. Hey For You is basically their $99 per year pricing. And it's basically rehashing the same thing that they experienced in 2020. So they got all this criticism, and here are the next steps. Provide a free standalone experience that serves as a companion to your paid web-based service and provide the option to purchase your app's content and services using in-app purchases. And yeah, again, it's their hack could potentially work to get them through, and it's just frustrating to hear that again from Apple. People in the comments also were wondering why they would make the team work over the weekend. Why on earth would you make your team work on the weekend just to release a calendar app maybe 2 days earlier? And it doesn't have to be crazy at work, really fine. And that's just a reference to a book that David wrote a few years ago, which is, it doesn't have to be crazy at work, where he says chaos shouldn't be the natural state at work. Anxiety isn't a prerequisite for progress. And on the title of the book, you can see can't sleep, Sunday afternoon emails, no time to think, stuck at the office, all-nighters, and then a huge cross on it. But you did still make your team work on your calendar app update that could have waited for the weekday. Anyway, I think that's just me nitpicking too much at this point. They managed to put their hack out and hopefully things work out for them. Yet another update, the app got approved, so congrats. It's just a little silly at the end of the day, if I'm being honest. But that's just the startup mindset for you. I want to know what you think in the comments. Do you agree with me? Do you agree with David? What's your take on this whole story? I would love to hear from you because I'm very conflicted about this myself. From a previous video that I posted about Kitsch, it seems that my videos get to the founders somehow. If you're David or if you're Jason Fried, the founders at 37 Signals, let me know if I got anything wrong. And I don't mean any offense. It's just that you guys do realize this is a little outrageous sometimes. All right, talk to you later. Bye.